So welcome to the bi-weekly Inspired Search Fireside Chat. My name is Oskar Verkamman and I'm Managing Director of Inspired Search. And it's an absolute pleasure to have David Prinselaar with us here today. I will introduce him in a minute, but first of all, I would like to say welcome to you, David.
Thank you very much and very happy to be here.
Our pleasure. David Prinselaar is Chief Supply Chain Officer and member of the Executive Committee at AkzoNobel. And before joining the company in 2015, David worked with Reckitt Benckiser, and he has a master's degree in mechanical engineering. Although with Belgian roots, David has lived and worked across the globe, including countries like, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, David, Malaysia, Spain, Germany, USA, Brazil, and now he's settled in Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
Correct.
Last year, David was elected as the #2 at the European Top 28 Supply Chain Executive list. And today we will speak about his role in AkzoNobel, leadership and talent development. So with that out of the way, David, can you tell us a little about your role, your scope and impact in the organization of AkzoNobel?
Oh, definitely. So again, thank you very much for having me. So my role is indeed a Chief Supply Chain Officer for AkzoNobel, and it's a role that I've had for the last 2 years. And I've been with Akzo for 5 years and in 3 different roles. So started off being responsible for operation for performance coating, which was one of the 3 business units. Then responsible for manufacturing, once we had divested chemicals, and then Chief Supply Chain Officer for the last 2 years. It is a role that is part of the Executive Committee. So that is something that our CEO, Thierry Van Lancker, was quite adamant about, was to ensure that it's a role that has also a view and a influencing capability to the total organization. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I'm part of the Executive Committee, there's an expectation that I influence in the best possible way the total strategy of the company, whilst I also do have a functional, more direct responsibility for the supply chain function. Supply chain function in AkzoNobel is supply planning, logistics, manufacturing, and then of course health and safety and so on.
So not including the planning part of it?
The supply planning, yes, not the demand planning. So the demand planning, we still feel quite strong that it is closely connected to the sales organization, which is different model. Huh? So it is one of the 2 models that we've decided to go for, but really to ensure that it's close to the business and that we have a direct feedback from the business to the demand planning. But that's a model that we've decided, yes.
Excellent. So as executive recruiters, we speak to many candidates on a daily basis, I would say. And especially for the people who are a little bit further progress in their career, most of us, including myself at one stage, sort of ended up in supply chain, rather by chance than by actual decision. How did that work for you, David? How did you end up in supply chain?
Okay, that's a deep question. I think it started relatively early in my career. So I started as a management consultant for 5 years, and as a management consultant, and that's really advice I would say to the young people who would be listening, is it's a great job because you go into different industries, different roles, you deal with senior leadership in the different companies you go to, and it really enables to get a diverse view of what's out there, what are the different roles and functions. Whilst it also gives you some very strong work ethics. I mean, as a management consultant, working 80 hours a week was happening more often than not. But then it's throughout those 5 years that I realized that actually the roles which were closer to operation, so sometimes more the supply planning, sometimes more in procurement, sometimes more manufacturing, were the one which interested me the most, especially in some of the companies I've worked to. So it started relatively early. And then when I joined Reckitt Benckiser, I really joined within the operation, and then that continued to be a driving force in my career.
Yeah. Normally we end the conversation with, do you have any tips for young talent, right? So the first tip is already here.
Yeah, so I already gave one.
In consulting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I believe AkzoNobel as an organization, you're worldwide with quite large, extensive teams, I think around 35,000 or something like that. Which part of that falls in your organization, and how have you organized your organization, David?
Okay, so out of the, it's a bit less, it's about 34,000 employees. 13,000 will be in what we call integrated supply chain. So really in the supply chain and manufacturing that I've described. The way we've organized is regionally. So the idea is we split the world into different regions, and in each region we have a regional supply chain and a regional manufacturing. And that came from the idea that I did see that at some stage, it depends on where you are in your maturity, but to have a functional supply chain and a functional manufacturing did make sense because it is somewhat different capabilities. So we organize by regions, and then we have a central team that is responsible for more the strategic and transformational initiatives. So those would be, for example, health and safety, quality, resource productivity. So we have quite some strong planet ambition, operation excellence. Basically, all the strategic and transformational would be managed from the center and designed from the center, even though, of course, it will always be deployed in the regions.
Yeah. And I believe you had 3 independent supply chains almost with your chemical paint and coatings. With the divesting of your chemical business, is the balance now one integrated supply chain, or is it still work in progress?
No. So clearly we've moved into a functional integrated supply chain. So one integrated supply chain serving all the business.
Yeah.
Clearly the objective is always to understand in the end-to-end supply chain what needs to be business and aligned to the business, because at the end, the role of integrated supply chain is to support the business, and what can be leveraged. So typically a warehouse, you want this to be fully leveraged. A planning team, well, ideally, you also want them to be leveraged. Factories definitely also want to be leveraged. So it's about finding the balance of what needs to be really clearly business oriented and what can be leveraged, and then, of course, managed through those strategic initiatives.
Yeah. Quite often, supply chains and manufacturing as well are sort of considered as a cost, and at the best, it's impacting the bottom line, right? So what's your view on supply chains? Should they impact the top line as well?
Yeah, exactly. I think the ambition is to ensure that supply chain is seen as a strategic, as a partner, and for sure a customer-driven partner to the business we serve. I really believe that integrated supply chain helps deliver the top line and the bottom line. And maybe to expand a bit more, because it's an important question, because I really believe that supply chain is a strategic weapon to the business. Is the way we can support the top line is really by having competitive service delivery, by investing actually and maybe adding some cost in areas of the supply chain that can give us and make us a differentiator versus competition. So typically maybe same-day delivery could be a competitive advantage. But in some other market, maybe the cost is a competitive advantage. So it's really finding the right balance on how we can best support the business for the top line. But for example, lead time to market is also clearly a competitive advantage for the top line. And then, of course, yes, the supply chain is an expensive part of a P&L. So the more we can optimize the bottom line, the better it helps the P&L.
Yeah. That's always right. So to have those discussions like adding costs to increase your revenue or your competitive advantage, is it therefore important that supply chain is represented in the board as it is with AkzoNobel?
Absolutely. I think it, of course, there's different level of representation. Clearly in the executive committee, that's my role to influence and to try to find at least the common agreement in terms of projects where really we see that for the company as a whole will be a differentiator. So for example, some specific lighthouse where we say this is where we really want to drive market penetration. Then of course, supply chain, we need to really make sure that we can support it in the best way. But I would say it also goes lower level. So within the different business, within the different countries, we also have a clear expectation that there's a strong alignment between the integrated supply chain plan to support the business.
Yeah.
And this is also aligning on the product portfolio, aligning on what part of the countries or the go-to market where we would like to invest. However, to be very clear, it should always be business driven. Yeah, and that's a very important message. Is integrated supply chain or supply chain is here to support the business. We should not be deciding whether we should go for one segment or not. No, that's not a rule.
Understand, but what you're saying also is it's not only being represented at a headquarters, but also in the regions close to the business at various levels, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Excellent. And when I interviewed you last year for Supply Chain Movement, you mentioned that your job is to change the mindset and culture and encourage collaboration amongst colleagues whilst driving the supply chain transformation at the same time, right? And with that in mind, can you describe a little bit what your management style is and if that significantly has changed over time in your career?
Yes. So maybe just also to give a bit of background. So for the last 3 years in AkzoNobel, we were really focusing on driving an increase in our profitability. We were lagging behind our key competitors, and we needed to achieve a 15% return on sales to be at the same level as our competition. So to some extent, we had to drive a very strong functional agenda, get cost out, but to some extent that could be done relatively in silos, even though that's a word which is actually banned in AkzoNobel. However, the more we move to grow and deliver strategy, where we do need to have an element of growth, we need to ensure that there is a big push in collaboration between all the functions. So my style is very much linked to being very open, very much transparent. I do believe that it is our duty to show the real cost of a decision, that to enable for the business to make the right decisions, but also to continuously demonstrate the strong collaboration, to show that there is a big element of the time that it needs to be spent in working with the stakeholders to really understand them. Because the more we understand them, the more we understand the details of the business strategy, the more we can support. If you ask me what was maybe the biggest change in the last couple of years, it's slowly moving from a functional view to a much more business view. And that is the role which I have more in the executive committee is to be much more business oriented and much more strategic. I would say. Initially, maybe I was moving to driving an operational strategy. Now it's more to support the overall strategy of the company.
More holistic view.
Yes, absolutely.
One element. And this is maybe for the last year. 2020 has been a very interesting year, right?
Yes, it was difficult. It was we're extremely happy and proud of where we ended, because at the end we delivered the 15.0% profitability that we were targeting for 3 years. But it was an immense transformation, which really it's the whole AkzoNobel can be extremely proud of this achievement to change so profoundly the total company, because it went beyond supply chain in such a short amount of time, and the size and complexity of AkzoNobel is actually quite a nice achievement.
But normally in such a transformation, you have a roadmap plan, you go out, you have town hall meetings, you're speaking to people, you're collecting feedback, and all of that sort of went away with the travel limitations in 2020, and it's still continuing this year as well. Did that change your approach to the organization and your team?
Yeah, definitely the approach changed, because typically I was someone who liked being on the ground and to be able to have town halls directly to the sites and to share the vision as much as possible. Yes, we had to use different tools. So Teams is clearly a new tool, but we started doing some virtual tools. So last week I was in Australia for 6 hours in the morning, and in the afternoon I was for 4 hours in Pontiac, so in the US. Yeah. So we've managed to change, but the tools do enable to do quite a lot of things. So we do proper physical tour of the factory. So yeah. We spend some good amount of time with new technology. And we are able to communicate. However, the direct, let's say, link with my direct team, yes, now it's every week we have a session with the team. We have town halls, or let's say a webinar every second month. We have a call with the top 200 every second month. So we really have emphasized much more communication. And I would say maybe the spirit or the mind change is changing, or is moving from communicating to engaging. And maybe that's a bit the spirit that we try to do, is when we communicate, let's think about not as a communication, but how can we drive through this communication the engagement?
Yeah. And as part of that conversation and the program, it's quite easy for especially if you're at the top of the pyramid, to provide feedback to the ranks below you, right? But how have you organized feedback to yourself from your teams, but maybe also with an external coach or mentoring? Does that play any important role in how you operate? David?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I have to say, that's maybe a bit the fear, is that once you achieve a certain level, you still need to be grounded. And that's why I really like to go and still visit the sites, because you are grounded. You see the reality. You don't see what someone decided to show you. You see it like it is. So for me, it's always important to stay grounded. And the way personally I approach it is, I have a couple of people or sessions where I go relatively lower. So I would have what I call the 1060. So it's a 60-minute lunch, virtual lunch with 10 people, which are picked up randomly. Not randomly, sometimes the people can be done, but the idea is really to go and speak directly with a range of levels, range of functions, every second week, to be able to stay grounded. To the question whether I've used a coach, yes, absolutely. I think it's important at some stage, especially when you transition to different roles and different level of responsibility, to have a coach that can help facilitate this transition.
Yeah, I believe it's still an underestimated important aspect of your own development, having coaches. In your experience, does the coach have to come from the same company with a supply chain background, or can it be someone really outside that comfort zone?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a question it's an individual question, or it's a question that individually you need to answer. I've decided to go outside. And to go outside expertise, so someone who would have a bit more holistic view. But and again, this is my individual answer. I need someone that can challenge me, or that can, give the feedback which hurts. Some people don't like it, but for me, it's actually a trigger point, which that was a painful observation. I need to act on it. Yeah. So typically, I choose someone who is very direct. Who has industry knowledge. So for example, here I chose a coach that understands how executive committee works, how board room works, because that was relatively new to me. But again, I think it's an individual answer. People need to decide what works best for them. Yeah. But I would recommend, to your question, is it important? Yes, I think it's important to have in some situation a coach and someone who is really able to assess what is working well and where you have a progression, and avoid to hit the glass door, which you might not have seen coming.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. And in hindsight, I even realized that my wife, my partner, and the kids and private friends played an important role in that. Because they don't know anything about your career, your ambitions, your challenges. They just give you honest feedback, especially the kids.
It's part of being grounded. It's always when you have a discussion with your daughter and you say, "Listen, I think you should listen to me," and she slams the door and say, "I really don't think you're interesting." Yeah, it's interesting.
It's good. Yeah, it's good. If you look to the next generation, especially the challenging times, because it's only couple of years ago that we went through the whole financial crisis, and now we have this whole COVID. What are the essential key attributes for future, maybe not even supply chain leaders, but supply chain leaders and leaders in general?
I think what will help is definitely capabilities or people that have a breadth of capabilities. I think mono capabilities will soon disappear, and I think you need to ensure that you have the ability to have a wide experience, and an ability to self-learn. That's always a question, and maybe that's a trick, is every time I do an interview, I always ask, what do you do to continuously develop yourself? And I think that is more important than ever, to continuously have that capability. The second one I would mention is probably the ability to work well across culture, across diversity, across let's say across different functions. The key transformation always comes through this cross-functional agenda.
Yeah.
So probably those would be the two ones, and then open-minded. I think open-minded and be able to accept feedback. I think those who don't have this get very quickly limited in their career.
Yeah. And what we're hearing back from a lot of those type of conversations is the ability to adapt. And I think contingency planning is a good example, right? In the past, companies sort of try to list all possible future events and all the countermeasures. But I think the last couple of decades has proved that's not relevant anymore. It's more like, can your team as a whole deal with the unexpected?
Yeah, with the black swan.
Yeah. So the last couple of questions. What is your main boardroom topic at the moment? Is that sustainability? Is that digitalization, diversity, resilience? What is on your top agenda?
So I think, unfortunately, COVID is still up there, and COVID and all the byproducts. So COVID is for sure the market disruption, but also and how do we maintain a reliable operation? I think engagement, it's a consequence. It's continuously to drive engagement despite COVID, despite having the ability to be in the office and to communicate to people.
Or engagement within the internal organization.
Yes, absolutely. And then maybe also another one is, how do we translate some of the COVID new reality into opportunities? Yeah, and that's okay. We've got a whole range of answers to that, but it's we have a crisis. It's how do we at the end make the best out of this very difficult crisis. The second topic definitely is sustainability. You're absolutely right. It is an area where we are continuously thinking: can we do more? Can we be more reference? Can be more leading? And this also entails work with some of our suppliers and creating some partnership. And then maybe the third one is really the digital and automation. Okay. It's how do we really leverage the latest technology and in all areas. And again, here I could go back to my discussion about how digital and automation can support the top line with new tools which are much more customer facing. We can also see that we are in the B2B market mainly, but the idea is that the expectation of what exists today in the B2C becomes the B2B standard also. Yeah. So this is how the technology can support the top line, and of course in the bottom line is automation, analytics, and all these great things, which is changing the spirit, is driving continuous improvement by using new technology available. So probably those are the three topics which I have an ExCom Thursday and Friday for sure. You know, a big part of one of the day will be on those.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And just one question on the first topic where you said, so we're still dealing with the whole COVID situation, but in parallel we try to understand what sort of new opportunities arise from that. And that seems to be quite a complex situation where on one hand you deal with this endless list of actions that you need to take to deal with COVID. At the same time, you want to take distance and look at it from a distance and say, what could we have done better? And what can we learn from this? And what are the opportunities? Yeah. Are you, with the teams, are you taking time out to do that exactly?
Yes, no, absolutely. And so, and to answer the approach we have, or I'm trying to implement as much as possible, is always to have an operational team that is really managing the operation, the acrobatics that we currently need to do to maintain services, but also another team which is taking some input, but is really taking a bit the time out, which is taking the balcony moment to ensure that we are still staying strategic and understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But yes, absolutely, we take time out. I mean, we had 2 days virtual meetings, and you can do more and more. I think here, for example, we are using Zoom or Teams, but you can have quite a lot of add-on that can actually create quite a lot of interface in those virtual setups.
Well, that sounds excellent. Last question before we wrap up, David. If you would give one bit more of advice to the early supply chain professional, or even maybe the student who is doing a supply chain study at the moment, what would be your advice to start your career or to progress?
Okay, so I would say probably two. I would say first to start in a job that gives you diversity. And really and go to companies that enable you to understand the different areas of supply chain and even different areas of functions. I think it's very important to understand what's out there and not to go in one direction without really understanding what's out there. So first job is, for me, it's relatively critical. First couple of jobs. I think at the beginning of your career to change regularly, I really do not see this as a problem. Of course, not every 6 months, but to do that. The second one, and it helped me, so I can only recommend it. It's geographical experience. I do believe that having international experience is very important, and the earlier you have it in your career, the more it helps you stay open, be welcoming feedback, be very clear that people are different. People have different aspirations. People have different motivating factors. So the more you can combine those two experiences, I think that would help. Maybe the cherry on top, having strong work ethics at the beginning of your career helps. And I'm not saying this that you need to be able to work 80 hours a week all the time, but throughout your career there will always be a couple of periods where you will need to work hard. And if you have this, the engine that enables you to spend a couple of weeks and maybe a couple of months maximum working hard, it's something that can help you.
I couldn't agree more. With that, thank you very much for your time, and looking forward for maybe another chat in the next year or so. Thank you very much, David, for your time.
Thank you very much to you. Thank you.